Welcome to today's event. Our host for the day is Ralph Henderson. Ralph is the founder and president of Omnichannel Productions. He produces world-class conferences and forums for executives in the supply chain industry. In addition, he assists industry experts and professional speakers to create presentations that are relevant to the event and engaging and impactful for the attendees. Supply Chain Today is an internet series hosted by Ralph that showcases innovations and trends that impact the entire supply chain market. Ralph also helps the UNCC football and basketball program with their events, and he works with the NFL Carolina Panthers in their fan engagement division, Keep Pounding. In addition, he works with Live Nation, a $4.4 billion events promotion company based in Beverly Hills, California. Today, he's working with you.
In the next 2 hours, you're going to learn something that is going to affect your life for the rest of your life. Hi, I'm Ralph Henderson. Welcome to VUCA. How do we get better? I'm excited because, like I said, for 2 hours, you're going to hear from some great leaders and you're going to learn something that will help you professionally and personally for the rest of your life. It's these leaders that we come to, that we aspire to, that help us aspiring leaders. It's important that we come around people during these times of VUCA and enjoy the people that help us raise our average. And that's going to happen today, I promise you. What I would ask you to do is put everything else aside, because what you're going to see and hear today is going to be very important. And it is going to be something that you'll be able to apply and something that you'll be able to use in your professional and personal life today and for quite a while. I would love to hear from you a year from today. I would love to hear what you heard and how it affected your last 12 months. So let's do this. Make me a promise that you and I are going to get together a year from now, and we're going to talk about what you heard and saw today so that we can talk about how you used it and applied it. Today we have 3 presentations. We also have an opportunity to speak to each presenter. They will avail themselves live so that we can ask them questions. I would encourage you to be thinking about those questions while they're presenting. I would encourage you to be thinking about how you can ask them something that will help you apply what you're learning to what you're doing. We're also gonna get a summary from each one of the presenters after they do their Q&A so that we can then remember what they spoke about, but more importantly, in a summation kind of way, apply it to what we're doing. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to get a great deal of information dispensed over the next couple of hours. So I really would ask you to focus and really lean in on this information, because we've spent a lot of time to add value to your next 2 hours. So everything's action-packed. You won't have really an opportunity to kind of just listen in. You'll need to lean in. I want to say thank you to our executive producer and presenting sponsor, G3L, and founder, Frank Schwartz. Frank isn't even in our industry, and yet he has decided that this was important enough for us leaders and supply chain professionals to know and hear about, that he decided to sponsor today and be a part of this. And we appreciate him and his organization very much. And we're going to get to hear from him for a few minutes in a few minutes. And I encourage you to stick around for that. How do we get back to better? Well, today's agenda. Dr. Tompkins is going to talk about VUCA. And he's going to give us an impactful and creative and applicable message that will help us be better leaders and aspiring leaders. Craig Henry We'll talk about disruptive technology and how we can use times to help us better go forward and even better to prepare. Finally, Krish Nathan will talk about how important it is to be even better with your people in times like this, because we all know it's our people that will ultimately make us better. Finally, Dr. Tompkins has agreed to close our session today with a very important inspirational message on what's next. And I use that term next on purpose. And he's going to be talking about our topic as we move forward. So you're going to want to stick around for this entire webinar because, again, it's really well produced and very well packaged, and the 2 hours has a lot of meat in it. A former submarine trainer of mine, after I went through training to serve on board a submarine for our US Navy, used to tell us when we were going into the training, he would say, "Buckle up, boys. We're going to take a few deep dives and some fast surfacing training." So let's hope our surfaces are greater than our dives at the end of the day, so we live to fight another day. Are you ready? I know I am. Our first presenter is Dr. Tompkins. Dr. James Tompkins is an international authority on designing and implementing end-to-end supply chains. As the founder and chairman of Tompkins International, his focus over the last several years has been in the areas of digital commerce, unichannel, and supply chain reinvention, helping companies connect supply chain processes with the customer journey to increase long-term profitable growth. Jim coined the phrase, "sell anywhere," which is the strategy of selling through a wide range of online and offline channels which consumers shop, buy, and enjoy products. Jim is a thought leader. For 40 years, Tompkins International has evolved from a supply chain consulting firm to an end-to-end consulting firm. Jim has wonderful presentations and videos that he does online. One of them is Anti-Brittle, Succeeding and Flourishing in These Uncertain and Volatile Times. It's fantastic. If you've not seen it, I would recommend you going out and looking at that. And Jim also shares his knowledge and provides up-to-date information on supply chain business trends via LinkedIn and Twitter. Please welcome Jim Tompkins.
Hello, I'm Jim Tompkins, founder and chairman of Tompkins International, and I'm here today to talk about VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. The term VUCA was invented in 1987 by the U.S. Army War College. They invented the term as a result of the Cold War. This was a war between the Soviet Union and the United States, the East versus the West. It's called a Cold War because the two superpowers never actually fought. What there was is a series of proxy wars between the Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc. There was the Berlin blockade. There was the Chinese Civil War, the Korean War, the Suez Crisis, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Czechoslovakian invasion, the Vietnam War, and the Afghanistanian War. While that was all going on, there was the space race. There was the Olympics. There was the Khrushchev versus Eisenhower. There's the Brezhnev versus Nixon battles. In 1961, they built the Berlin Wall to split the East from the West of Berlin. In 1987, President Reagan went to the wall and he challenged Gorbachev, "Gorbachev, tear down this wall." In 1987, 2 months after Reagan was speaking, we had a concert. David Bowie had a concert at the wall. In 1988, Bruce Springsteen had a concert at the wall. In 1989, Poland and Hungary uprising, and what happened? The wall came down and the Soviet Union fell. The policy that was used to drive that entire Cold War was VUCA. So let's talk about VUCA. First of all, volatility. Volatility is the nature of change. It's the type and the magnitude of change. It's the speed of change, how quickly things are moving, and it's the frequency of change, how often, monthly oftentimes these days. Volatility can be proactive in that it's self-induced, or it can be reactive in that it's brought on by competitors. Change can be brought upon by external factors, tornadoes, earthquakes, pandemics, recessions, depression. What we have today is we have volatility going on with proactive change, reactive change, and crises change. Lots of volatility, holy volatility. The U stands for uncertainty, the lack of predictability. These are the most uncertain times in the history of the world. Uncertainty makes it impossible to define the requirements, and therefore, if you can't define the requirements of a facility, of a supply chain, of an operation, you cannot define the optimal that maximizes the performance of those requirements. So what we have is a change in the whole approach that we take to problem solving. We no longer can optimize a solution because we don't have a clear understanding of the requirements. Holy uncertainty. Third is complexity. Complexity is a multiplex of forces and confounding issues. It's a lack of cause and effect. We don't know why things are happening. Things are so complex, we can't understand it. It's a blurred definition of the roles that are taking place. In the old days, I used to know what an in-store retailer was, what an online retailer was. I used to have an understanding what a manufacturer was, what a wholesaler was. But today, for example, Kroger's in-store, Kroger's online. Kroger is a manufacturer, a huge private label program, and Kroger is a wholesaler. They sell on Alibaba. And so the blurring of the definitions of the roles is huge. The increase in complexity as a result of selling anywhere, where you have to sell in your store, online, on other people's websites, you got to sell it on marketplaces, and so you got a holy complexity going on. And then lastly is ambiguity, the haziness of reality, the potential of misreads. It's a lack of clarity about everything. You don't have any clarity about anything. Every single day there's a surprise. Every single day I pick up the Wall Street Journal and there's something happening that I hadn't anticipated. The evolution of the new era of digital commerce is changing commerce daily. Every day there's something new that's happening. The speed of marketplace and the customer expectation and the speed at which companies are making decisions is unbelievable. The customer expects to click and have it delivered in the front door. They want great service, but what was great service just last month, today is just okay service, and 6 months from now it's going to be terrible service. So there's this huge expectation of what kind of service is really good. At the same time, we have a decision process, the challenge that's going on in many companies, in that there's a lack of decision making. Everything is so slow to take place. There's a lack of clarity of leadership, and therefore there's a lack of urgency. This is resulting in further ambiguity, holy ambiguity. And so if we look at VUCA today, we are hitting records every single day. Why is this VUCA so prominent today? Why is this happening? Well, it's because of two types of disruptions. There's innovation disruptions and there's crisis disruptions. And these innovation disruptions and this crisis disruption are taking place at the same time. If we look at the slide on the screen now, we look at a picture of innovative disruption. With innovative disruption, we begin with an innovation that leads to entrepreneurship, but sometimes those innovations and entrepreneurship are viewed as being too risky or too different, and so they rest in peace. Sometimes you get through entrepreneurship and you get to the disruptor, but then that's viewed as being too risky, and that results in rest in peace. But sometimes those innovations and entrepreneurship and disruptors become bold, and we actually disrupt the status quo. We then go in a process of incubation, of validation, of learning from the mistakes that are made. We establish a new status quo, and then we get professional management that results in us becoming the new established firm. When firms become the new established firm, sometimes they say, let's not change anything. Let's keep doing what we're doing, and we're risk averse. That risk adversity results in a resistance to change, and once again back to rest in peace. But some firms understand that their established firm is only good for that 6-month period, for that 2-month period, and they need a new innovation, new courageous leadership, and new boldness. And therefore, we go around the circle of profitable growth and value creation, around and around and around, going faster and faster and faster. So innovation disruption can be proactive, that you're the ones making the disruptions, or they can be reactive in that what's happening is someone else is making the disruptions and you're trying to respond to what they're doing. That's innovative disruptions. The second type of disruptions are crisis disruptions. And here we use the term black swan oftentimes, because with a black swan event, a crisis disruption is occurring, and that something happens that never happened before or is extremely rare that it happens. Sometimes what we find is it takes people by surprise, and what they see is a massive transformational impact. And so what happens is once you get past that, we then have people that say, oh, well, I kind of thought I saw this coming. I thought I understood it. But in advance, they have no idea. So crisis disruptions are huge, and they're taking place on an ever-increasing rate. On a global basis, a crisis disruption can be a pandemic. It could be a recession. It could be a depression. It could be something with the supply chain. On a local basis, it could be a tornado. It could be an earthquake. It could be a tsunami. Or it could be a local issue on supply chain. If you look at the top 15 causes of crisis disruption in 2018, what you find out is the top 15 is 90% of all the problems. The 15 are mergers and acquisitions, factory fires or explosion, reorganization, business sale or spinoff, factory slowdown or disruption, regulatory change or tariffs, extreme weather, hurricanes, typhoons, cyclones, earthquakes, labor strikes, EMA, FDA or OSHA accidents, fines or recalls, power outages, labor action, or port disruption. Those are the top 15. Those are 90% of the total. If you look at the next 15 for a total of the top 30, that's 99.8% of all crisis disruptions. And the words in 2018 does not include health. It does not include pandemic. There's no incidence of those in the top 99.8% of the crises in 2018. At the end of 2019, they got a group of trade experts together, and they said, what are the crises you expect in 2020? No one mentioned a pandemic. No one mentioned COVID-19. No one mentioned human health. It wasn't on the list. And so what we're seeing is the level of crises of COVID-19 is unbelievable. And when that's combined with the innovative crises, what we have is a huge increase of what's going on. If we look at what's happening recently, we see in 1990 there was a recession. 11 years later, in 2001, there was the 9/11 terrorist attack. 7 years later, in 2008, there was the mortgage crisis. 6 years later, in 2014, we had Ebola. And 5 years later, in 2019, we had COVID-19. And so it goes from 11 years, 7 years, 6 years, 5 years. And the question is, what's going to be the next major global crises? And so crises are disrupting at an unbelievable rate. And so what we have is disruption beyond belief. And so if we think in recent history what's been going on, what we see, we have the highest level of innovative disruption in the history of the world. If we look, we see we have the highest level of crisis disruption in the history of the world. And so we have VUCA over the top. Wow, holy VUCA. And so what do we do about these record levels of VUCA? There's two things we need to do. First is continuous improvement, transformation, and reinvention. And secondly is anti-brittle. So let's begin with the discussion of continuous improvement, transformation, and reinvention. Continuous improvement, if we were talking about bugs, would be ametrobolia. Ametrobolia means no. A means none in Latin, no metamorphosis. Transformation is hemimetrobolia, which means partial metamorphosis. And if we were talking about reinvention, that would be holometabole, or total metamorphosis. And so if we're looking at examples for continuous improvement, ametabole, we would be talking about a baby ant that becomes an adult ant. There's growth, but there's really no change. The baby ant and the adult ant are the same. They're just larger. The adult ant is bigger. If we look at transformation, the hemimetabole, what we see is a grasshopper. We have a baby grasshopper that grows to be an adult grasshopper, and at first they look alike, but then when we look at it and say, wait a minute, the adult grasshopper has wings. If we cut the adult grasshopper open, we would find reproductive organs. And so what we find is it's a partial metamorphosis, it's a transformation. But then the reinvention is the caterpillar. You have this little dust-sucking worm that crawls around on his stomach in the dirt, that one night takes a nap, he wakes up from that nap and he finds himself in a cocoon. He eats his way out of the cocoon and he's a beautiful butterfly. There's a holometabole, there's a total metamorphosis. It's a totally different thing. You went from a little worm that crawled on the dirt that the kids said, oh, yucky caterpillar, and now you have this gorgeous butterfly that the kids chase and say, oh, beautiful butterfly. And so it's a total different metamorphosis, a totally different bug. And so if we look at this from the point of view of the circle of life for a company, we see that successful companies begin moving forward with an ametabole, a continuous improvement success story. And so they grow and they become bigger, they're more profitable, they're larger. And then they hit a hemimetabolic phase, where if what you're doing is dealing with a disruption in product or service, and what you try to do is apply continuous improvement, you're not going to be able to handle that disruption. What you need is a transformation to have greater success. That greater success leads to a higher level of success, where you have a disruption in the business model. If the disruption in the business model is addressed by using continuous improvement or using transformation, you will go bankrupt. And when you have a disruption in the business model, you need to reinvent yourself for greater success. And so we move from continuous improvement to transformation to reinvention, and we cycle through that process. What's most important? Well, it depends on the opportunity, depends on the challenge. If we have a challenge which is continuous improvement needing, we do continuous improvement. If we need transformation, we do transformation. And if we need reinvention, we do reinvention. And so the first way we address VUCA is by dealing with continuous improvement, transformation, and reinvention. The next way we deal with the tremendous record levels of VUCA is with anti-brittle. The anti-brittle question that we need to ask is, should we be trying to establish an optimal solution, or should we be developing solutions that offer us a series of optional solutions, allowing us to adapt over time to the circumstances that occur? The answer is, we should be developing a series of optional solutions that allow us to adapt over time to the circumstances as they occur. We should be pursuing anti-brittle solutions. They're solutions that don't break. They're not brittle. They bounce. They have resilience. And so what we need to understand is that optionality is what we should be doing, not optimality. By allowing ourselves to look at an optimal solution that's going to last for a short period of time, but then have the ability to quickly pivot to another option. The requirement change, we pivot to another option. The requirement change, we change to another option. We now have optionality, where optionality is superior to optimality. That, given today's VUCA, is what we need to be doing. With VUCA today, what we need to be doing is looking at continuous improvement, transformation, and reinvention. With the level of VUCA today, we need to be looking at anti-brittle solutions, where we focus on the optionality of the solution and not the optimality.
Wow, that was quite a bit of information. And I got to tell you, I loved how you used the example between the metamorphosis and the ant. That was really incredible. My goodness gracious. You talk about VUCA and how long we've been in this volatile and uncertain time. In the supply chain space, we've been in this for a long time. So it's great to have Jim bring to us kind of an explanation of what it is and how it applies to us. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to go into the question and answer portion of our program. And what that means is some of you have put in here some questions, and we appreciate that. If others of you have questions, by all means, go to the Q&A section and give us your questions. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes or so going through these questions with our panelist, Dr. Tompkins. So now I'm going to welcome Dr. Tompkins to the platform. And this may take just a minute or two. While he's doing that, I want to go ahead and ask him to go ahead and unmute and to turn on his camera.
I am unmuted and my camera is on. At least it says it is, Ralph. So
it is.
It is. Okay. I just
Perfect.
have to say it.
Yeah.
I noticed I'm sitting in the same room as I was when I taped. This is my Zoom room, if you will.
Nice.
But quite surprisingly, I have the same sport coat and the same shirt on. I had not the same shirt, but the same color shirt as when we did the video. And Ralph, you're looking dapper today in your blue shirt and blue blazer as well. So we're very much in style.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, after I saw that video, I had to go change, right? I mean, I aspire. So that's why I'm trying to be like you.
Well, I didn't see the video, obviously, because I dressed the same. I guess I dressed myself in the morning. We did the video as well. So great to be here, Ralph. And
thank you.
Great show you're putting on here.
Well, and I got to tell you, it's a great presentation you gave. You and I have been working together now for a little over 5 years, and I'm always amazed with how well you can take something that's so complicated and you can disperse it so that every level of education and experience in the audience gets something out of it. And as a producer, I can tell you that is not easy. A lot of times producers will go after a certain segment of that audience, and you're really able to capture all of them. So I just want to say thank you and let you know how much I appreciate that as well. So during your talk, we have some questions, and I would love to just dig right into those because we've just got a short amount of time. So let's start with this question here. You said in your presentation that you give an example of innovative disruption as digital commerce, and an example of crisis disruption as COVID-19. Wouldn't either of these disruptions by themselves create a huge VUCA event?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great question, Ralph, because if we look at the innovative disruption of digital commerce, it's literally changing the way we do business. And so business is totally different than it was, and that's occurring on an ongoing basis. But then in addition to that innovative disruption, we have this black swan that no one predicted, this pandemic, this COVID-19, right, that is absolutely creating a level of uncertainty that is beyond anything we've ever experienced. And so the key point here is that we're doing a record innovative disruption and a record crisis disruption at the same time. Right. And so this is VUCA on steroids. This is the most unbelievable timing that's been, it's possible. I began talking about VUCA 2 years ago when I was talking about the disruption that was occurring because of e-commerce. And then along comes the black swan of COVID-19, and wow, we have a VUCA on steroids. Now, wow, an interesting thing about that is how people are responding to that VUCA. And I see people wanting to say, oh, well, here's the answer to VUCA. Well, there are some thoughts that we can talk about, like optionality and agility and so forth, as we covered in the video. But you have to look at each company separately. And so what I've started to do is I've started to look at a company from the point of view, where were they last December? And there I can very simply say they're doing well or they're not doing well. And then I look at where are they today? Where is their industry group? And you're either a have or a have not.
Right.
So for example, there's a category I call boom to boom. So boom means in December you were doing well. And boom means you're in a have category right now in the middle of COVID. And so an example of a boom to boom would be Walmart. They were doing great last December, and now they're doing even more great. Their stock is one of the few stocks that's actually up coming out of COVID-19. The second category is a boom to doom. They weren't doing well. They were doing well in December, but now they're not. An example of that would be, for example, Marriott. And Marriott isn't focusing on booming, they're focusing on hibernating and how to just kind of shut her down and get through and wait for the market to come back. And then the third type is the folks that were not doing well in December, but all of a sudden now they're a have. And that's, for example, Clorox. Clorox was not doing well in December. They were flat. But now they can't meet all the demand they have for the sanitary products that they are producing. And so their wipes and their cleansers and their hand washes are unbelievable what Clorox is doing. Their demand is 5 times what they can produce. And so they are a doom to boom. And then the last category, the one we don't like to talk about so much, is the doom to tomb. Yeah, and that's kind of sad. Yeah. But the fact of the matter is, look at Gold's Gym. In December, they weren't doing so well. But now they're a have-not. No one's going to a gym. The gyms are all closed. And so Gold Gyms filed for bankruptcy. So I think from the point of view of understanding the magnitude of a innovative disruption and a crisis disruption, it's really critical we put that in the context of how is your company doing, how is their marketplace doing, and that then gives us some ability to look at how we can get back to being better. And that's what we want to make sure we think about when we look at that level of disruption at VUCA that's taking place today. Right on.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you saying that. I'm going to coin this phrase for you, and I mean this sincerely. You know, in the past, you know, we had the good to great that became famous. I believe you're going to take us from great to better.
Amen.
So here we have a question. It says, any thoughts on organizational change needed to accomplish the optionality that you referred to?
Oh, good question. I've been working on that one because there's that's foundational. You know, when you read a basic book on leadership, one of the first things a leadership book tell you, make sure you have the right organization and they have the right people in the right seats. And so I think this question needs to be, what is the right structure? And then what is the right people to put in those places? The structure needs to be quite a bit broader in that we don't want to have a guy that's running transportation and have another guy that's running inventory and have another guy that's running procurement, have another guy running sourcing. What we need to do is we need to make sure that we bring those all together into an overall supply chain view. We need to do the same thing on marketing and sales. And so we need to have a much more integrated organization so that we can respond quicker to the disruptions that are occurring to us. And so I would say, what is your organizational weaknesses with respect to agility? Identify where you are least responsive, identify where you have the least agility, and those areas are areas that you have to broaden the responsibility of the people taking control. And so you really need to make that happen. Then from the point of view of what types of people should fill those greater agile, broader based functions, you need to have people that are nimble. You need to have people that are not afraid of going after the sacred cows, that are not afraid of shaking the boat a little bit. I think what we need to do is have people that are aware of the fact that change is going to occur at a pace like we've never seen before. I hear people talk about going back to the normal. We're never going to go back to normal. Normal is history. In fact, I hear people talk about, well, we're going to go to a new normal. Well, certainly we will, but that new normal is going to be limited, and that what we're going to really see is we're going to have the next normal, and the next normal and the next normal and the next normal. So we need to have people that are able to go with the punches and to be able to respond to the requirements that are filling the needs today. So the guy that's been working for you for 30 years and doing a great job doing the same thing, they probably need to be put in a totally different position, because we don't want to do it the same old. The same old is old. We got to get rid of it and get on with the new.
No, I agree with all of that. And I'm certainly not trying to make light of where we are as a country right now, but I started up Omnichannel Productions in 2009. You remember where we were then?
Yeah, that was the last mortgage crisis. Yep,
yeah,
another black swan.
So I kind of feel a little bit at home here. So we'll see if I can prosper as much as I did the last time coming out of this one. Another question that came in that I really like is because it brings up a topic or an area that I would love to hear from you because of your experience. And that is, do you expect more companies to leave China as a result of this pandemic?
Well, I think there's two parts there. There is the political side of the fairness of the relationship and so forth, and I'll leave that to the politicians, and I'll stay free of that. But that is an important ingredient.
No, it is for sure. Yeah.
And in fact, in these days where we have lots of people talking about restarting the economy, and when you hear the politicians talking about it as if the federal or the state or the local mayors are in control of something, they can lift the stay-at-home orders, they can lift the non-essential business orders, they can lift the orders, but lifting the orders does not restart the economy. The restarting the economy begins when the supply chain people say it's going to start. The supply chain people, are the ones that are going to resynchronize supply and demand, and that's what's going to start the economy. And so that's a very important subject. Read for me again the detail on the question. I got off onto the political side. The China thing. Okay, yes, I got it. Yeah. So the thing with China, there is going to be companies that are going to want to de-emphasize the volume of product they're buying from China, because what that does is that gives them a lack of resilience. You're putting all your eggs in one basket. We learned when we were 5 years old, don't put all your eggs in one basket. But what we have done, mostly because from a cost point of view, we have continued to go back to China. Back when the tsunami hit Japan in 2011, we said, we're going to do a better job of having multiple sources. We're going to diversify those sources. Well, then the financial people got involved and said, well, we can save 6 cents if we do this. We can save 2 cents if we do this. And we got hung up on that. And now what we've done is we've put ourselves into a very difficult position. So our company is going to be leaving China? Yes. And I think what we're going to have is mandates coming down from the CFO and the CEO that are going to say, we want to take 30% of our sourcing out of China and put it in another location so we can minimize that risk. I think that's going to happen. I think it's a big, big, big opportunity for us.
And final question, Jim, and I really appreciate everything you're talking about. And I can't wait for everybody to hear your final keynote on this at the end of this broadcast, because I've had the luxury of being able to see that, and it's very, very inspirational. So again, if you're on this call and you didn't hear, we will have a final note from Jim on that. The last question, though, is I do want to talk about this optionality, and we just have a few minutes, but I want to talk about this optionality and new optimal, because we're getting several questions that are kind of saying the same thing, and that is, how is it related to VUCA?
So great. Oh, wow. You did well on summarizing some questions there, Ralph, because that's a big one. VUCA creates uncertainty. Uncertainty says you have a hard time predicting what the future is going to be. So when I do a network design, when I do a warehouse design, when I do justification of robots, what I'm doing is I'm looking at what are the 4 or 5 year requirements, and then what would be the capital expenditure, what would be the savings, and then what's the return on investment. Well, the problem with that is to optimize, I need to have a good set of requirements. If I don't have a good set of requirements, how am I going to optimize the solution? Optimization, by definition, means you're either going to maximize or minimize an objective function. But when the objective function is unknown, because you don't know if you're going to produce 2 million of those a year or you're going to produce 4 million a year, you don't have a criteria upon which to justify, to optimize the equation. And so since we can't define the requirements, the best we can do is define a series of different scenarios. And those different scenarios, we can define an optimal solution for this scenario, an optimal solution for this scenario, and so forth and so on. And then what we need to do is have those options available to us. We then need to have timely information through a real-time visibility network so we can really see what's happening to us, and then we can pivot from this scenario to this scenario. And then something's going to happen, and we want to go back to this scenario. And so we want to have optionality so that we can pivot between the optimal solution for that short time frame within which we need to operate. And so that changes the way we design and plan supply chains. And so it's a big, big deal.
That's fantastic. Well, I can't tell you how much I have learned just in the few minutes we've been on this call. And as probably a shameless plug here, I need to get you on my show, The Supply Chain Today. We need to make that happen because I could sit here and talk to you about this for a half an hour.
Would love it, Ralph.
Okay, always. Thank you so much for your time. And I appreciate you, and I appreciate everything that you do for our industry. And it's just a pleasure to serve with you, and I look forward to us reconnecting soon.
Great, thank you, Ralph.
Now what we're going to hear is we're going to hear Jim talking about a summary of his talk that he just went over. This is important, and I've had each one of the presenters do this on purpose because I wanted to have a condensed version of what you heard so that you would be able to hear it, have a discussion about it, and then hear it again. I hope you appreciate that because the speakers, the presenters have taken some real effort in order to do that. So with that, I would love for you to now listen to Jim Tompkins' summation.
I have a 4-point VUCA summary. Number 1, dealing with VUCA, innovative disruption and crisis disruption today demands boldness, innovation, agility, and persistence. 2, VUCA is a high-stakes game. If you do well in times of VUCA, you will be very successful. If you do not do well in times of high VUCA, you will fail. 3rd, VUCA, although it's high stakes, it is not a high-risk game. In fact, high risk is totally the opposite. It's not dealing with the disruption cycle. It's not dealing with crises, but rather being risk averse and embracing business as usual. That is what is really high risk, is embracing business as usual. 4th, the process of changing the world is by working at an innovation, by handling a crisis at a time. You deal with innovation, you deal with crisis, and you will have an opportunity to change the world.
Again, thank you, Jim, for that. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And I'm sure this audience learned a great deal. And remember, for everybody who is listening and watching, we will have a rebroadcast of this, and you will have the opportunity to see it, but you also have the opportunity to tell your colleagues about it as well if you think it would add value to them. And we obviously believe it will. So we want to give you that opportunity to be able to do that. Now I go to our second speaker, and I am thrilled to have this gentleman on the program. Craig Henry and I met a few years ago on a project I was working on, and I got to really get engaged with him and his organization and how they are really ramping up what's going on in supply chain. Prior to what is happening right now, you know, we were talking about disruptive technology and artificial intelligence and augmented reality and it was just really interesting to hear about all those things. But when I met Craig and he was actually able to show me a lot of what that meant and how it applied to our industry, I thought, what a great person to have to talk about volatility and uncertainty in the supply chain space. So with that, I want to introduce you to Craig Henry. He is the industry manager for material handling and intralogistics for Siemens for the US. Leveraging automation, robotics, and data tools, he works with Fortune 500 CPG, automotive, and retail customers to fully digitize their delivery systems. Please help me welcome Craig Henry.
Hi, it's great to be with you on this really interesting topic of VUCA. My name is Craig Henry and I'm the industry manager for material handling and intralogistics for Siemens Industry in the United States. I've been in automation, motion control, and robotics throughout my career. Beginning with laying out industrial work cells to improve lead times, I've seen incredible changes in technology and its application and watched the birth of the fourth industrial revolution. I work with supply chain technology suppliers as well as end users as they rethink and transform their supply chains. This topic of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity is as timely as any topic that we could discuss today in supply chain or in all business in general. My objective today is to address what VUCA really is, to break it down and give you technological answers to the question, how do we attack VUCA and win? VUCA, an acronym made up of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, is a term born out of 1987 when the Cold War was about to come to its close. This is applicable because business in many ways is war. And as in war, technological advantage usually means victory. Volatility has to do with the rate of change. We see product life cycles, customer behaviors, and customization of products changing at a rate never seen before. Volatility's close cousin is uncertainty, which, as you know, has always existed in supply chain. Demand by its nature is uncertain, but uncertainty can be measured. Volatility can also be measured, and with those measurements we can set inventory levels, replenishment rates, reorder points, inventory locations, etc., to meet our stated customer service level. But how do we respond to rapid changes to these variables? This model we create for today's environment may not work tomorrow. Complexity means there are many factors and data that we must break down into actionable parts. We can do that. Again, the question is how? Now, ambiguity. This is the concept that there may be multiple possible viable answers or methods. This has always been true in business. Ambiguity provides opportunity, but I believe that in addressing the other three issues of volatility, uncertainty, and complexity, the ambiguity falls away and clearer paths will emerge. Here's the situation. The 2020 Material Handling Institute Industry Report is an excellent resource. It details and summarizes responses from 1,000+ organizations to today's supply chain challenges. Top problems have a common theme. That theme, change. Here's what's changing, broken down into 5 categories. First, we have the talent gap. Second, faster response times. Third, more customization. Fourth, increased transparency to customers. And fifth, smaller and more frequent shipments. All 5 of these areas, markets, competitors, and customers, are changing at a rate never seen before. Ironically, the reason for all of these changes is also tied up in the solution to these changes: digitalization. We are in the fourth industrial revolution of data. The use of digital tools is transforming the business model into a digital model. This is critical. And perhaps nowhere is this seen more than in the supply chain industry. Domino's Pizza, for example, see themselves as a technology company who happen to deliver pizzas. Amazon has gone on record saying that they are a data company who also happens to deliver product. If you have a teenager who enjoys video games, do not discourage it. She is developing skills for the digital world that we are only imagining now. The corporate dashboard of tomorrow is all about data and flexibility, making the right moves and reacting quickly to live data being generated throughout the enterprise. So, how does technology address VUCA? Let's look at technology that's needed to win. Now, technology basically is the application of science to accomplish a goal, usually industrial. But in our supply chain transformation, simply automating and speeding up process won't be enough. We have to move to data. Let's take the case of the Keedoozle grocery store, developed by Clarence Saunders in 1937. He was ahead of his time. His concept was to mechanize a grocery store, whereby patrons viewed their items, which were displayed under glass, inside the store. Customers presented a key that would be electronically stamped each time they selected an item. At the checkout, the key would be electronically read, and the items would come down a chute automatically and be priced. Also, automatically. It was an early automated storage and retrieval system for retail. It was automation, but it was not digital. It was before the digital age. This is the key difference. Mechanizing and automating alone do not bring us into the digital realm. The Keedoozle grocery store had no advantage when it came to product selection decisions, demand reporting, etc. Yet automation is the key to the implementation of an overall digital strategy. The 2020 MHI survey indicated that the #1 factor with potential to disrupt or create competitive advantage is, in fact, automation and robotics. So it follows the automation technologies must do more than mechanize or replace labor. Technology must create data in real time. This data includes production counts, system health, failure codes, overall effectiveness, etc. Flexibility through data, that's the key. Optionality that comes through that flexibility is what's going to make a supply chain ready for today and tomorrow. But what's the return on the data? Dr. Ranley Bradley, Associate Professor of Enterprise Architecture and Supply Chain, IT, at the University of Tennessee, cited this example at the MHI keynote at MODEX this year. The pharmaceutical industry alone can recoup approximately $25 billion just by improving inventory management by leveraging the data that is now being generated along the digital supply chain. This visibility allows companies to identify where efficiency is poor and to improve, and in the same way that addressing the bottleneck in any process is the key to improving the critical path. This evaluation done by Deloitte Consulting and MHI estimates that $5 billion in savings can be recouped in the pharmaceutical sector alone through the digital supply chain. So there is a payback, and it's a big one. Let's revisit this term, digitalization. Now, if you take a vinyl record, some of you might remember those, and record it into a digital media, for instance on a computer, that's digitization. It is simply a change in form. The transformation of a company model by making digital everything that can be digitized and changing it constantly, that's digitalization. But let's look further at the advantage of converting that analog record to digital. The file is much easier to edit, to change the sound using digital tools, to catalog it on your computer, to apply descriptive tags to the file, making it easier for people to search for it, to categorize it as lonely or soft rock or party background or my birthday song list. The Pandora music service uses over 450 attributes of music and rate songs according to listeners' unique tastes to provide a unique personal selection system. So it is the same sound as the analog vinyl record, but in the digital form, we're able to do so much more. The barcode is another great example. It was developed in the 1950s and was patented, but it was circular. And it wasn't until around 1970 where David Lorne made a picket fence or linear barcode. The Universal Product Code, or UPC, followed shortly thereafter. And in 1974, the first product, Wrigley's Chewing Gum, was scanned and purchased in Ohio using a UPC scanner. Walmart's founder, Sam Walton, was initially not a fan of the new barcode scanners. He held that his checkout clerks were slightly faster, and he was adamant about the efficiency of getting his clients through the checkout. Why install an extremely expensive scanning device at all the checkouts in all the stores when a simple cash register and a skilled and speedier checkout clerk did the job perfectly? The answer is transformational. The need to physically reprice all the stock on the floor was now eliminated completely, simply through software, a digital change, and prices were updated without one price gun sticker being applied. Pricing became digital. Take, for example, now a distribution center facility that was built 25 years ago. It's running at capacity. That's your vinyl record. We can scan that entire facility into a 3D point cloud model. We can digitize it. We can load that file into software and use those tools. With those tools, we can add or change its systems. We can insert function and motion and purpose into those systems in that model. We can propose changes and run those changes before we actually implement them in the real world. To be clear, these virtual operations, or digital twin, is extremely specific. We have tools at our disposal that include not just equipment, but the labor force. At pick stations, shipping and receiving functions, we can ergonomically test the throughput and safety of these functions. Here are Jack and Jill. The software displays the color of Jack or Jill's shirt in accordance with the safety of the motion and tasks they perform. So let's break down this function. Your supply chain model can be designed digitally. Your supply chain model can be simulated in software. Your new design or design ideas can be simulated in software. You now can commission your supply chain virtually before you buy the first piece of equipment or put one brick on another brick. In the implementation of your supply chain, you must have access to all your data from every corner of the organization. I spoke to a supply chain software company who described how customer behaviors on his retail client's clothing website connect all the way back through the organization and out to suppliers on another continent in order to determine how much of a particular color fabric needs to be made today. It's about the data. Through access to this data that we earn the ability to respond quickly. Vendor data on delivery quantities and arrival times, product tracking data throughout the enterprise, equipment downturns that affect customer service in real time, customer behaviors in real time, distribution center worker metrics and effectiveness in real time, distribution center occupancy, security, and temperature in real time, number of picking robots to deploy as the season ramps up or down in real time, which motor or drive system needs to be replaced today so that they don't die tomorrow in real time. And not only do we have this data, we also have the ability to amalgamate this data into actionable dashboards. Like our vinyl to digital example before, we can do even more with this data. So I imagine you have all this data. You may be saying, I'm drowning in data today, already without a digitalized organization. But remember, focused, actionable, real-time data is the target. That's not an easy task, but it can be accomplished in the transformation of your business. The next phase is to be able to analyze this data. And this is where AI comes into play. Artificial intelligence is a hot topic, and for good reason too. But let's demystify it. My father, long retired, worked for IBM for 23 years. He provided point-of-sale solutions to retailers and grocery stores. He told me the story of Bernie Paroli, who worked for Supermarket General in the 1960s and 70s. Bernie was the president of his supermarket. He would take home daily cash register receipts and sit at his kitchen table to look them through. He had no computer, and these slips had no product descriptions. These receipts were simply rolls of paper with stock codes and prices. But Bernie knew his inventory well and could recognize what was cereal, bananas, or toilet paper. He looked through them to learn something. He was looking for patterns, wondering what was selling better on the weekends, or why he ran out of yogurt last week, or what the effect of a price drop had on his sales of beans. That's AI, ability to respond quickly. We don't know what we don't know, so we collect the data, and we look for patterns. Just imagine if Bernie had barcodes and a system for capturing the data. Those codes would allow not only inventory management, but more accurate decision making, faster, at a reduced cost. He could do pricing analysis, forecasting. He could do product tracking, sales and advertising campaigns, social analysis, health research, psychology, security. We don't know what we don't know. That's still true today. Entering into the digital world is about gathering the data so we can determine what the path forward is. And we won't find out unless we get that data. With real-time data available, we can begin searching for patterns. This can inform the entire organization. Why does distribution center number 5 operate 20% more efficiently than the others? Why is there higher absenteeism with workers in distribution center number 1? Where are we seeing the most equipment failures? Which products are stocking out? Which ones are moving well? Are we categorizing our A, B, and C products correctly? By answering these questions, we organically move the company forward. Efficiencies go up, costs go down, and problems are averted. All of this data is for the purpose of flexibility to react to the always uncertain customer demand. The supply chain in the future will succeed because it is flexible. It's adapting to customer demand. The more reactive to customer demand, the better we will compete. If you are running a distribution center, if you are in parcel sortation and delivery, or in retail, there are options now available to you. Here's the recommended strategy I have. Set your strategic plan immediately to be digitalized, data-centric. Write clear and concise specifications internally and for your outsourced services and vendors that real-time data is absolutely required from them. 2, in your infrastructure, write clearly and concisely into your specifications that you need a digital ecosystem that is Industry 4.0 ready to produce and offer up data to your cloud from customer orders back through the organization through last mile transparency, distribution center movement, order picking, inventory management, vendor delivery data, purchase orders, and stock levels. Insist on real-time data, not after the fact reporting, which is so common. And 3, look outside your organization for best practices. If it isn't digital, break the model you have. Partner with the smart manufacturing and consulting companies who understand that flexibility is key. If you are a consulting firm, systems integrator, or machine builder providing supply chain solutions, you too have a critical role. You must master the tools to be able to skillfully lead your clients into a fully digital organization. With today's tools, you can do virtual proof of concepts to illustrate the viability of your designs. If you can show the digital twin of your client's new design, you will win the business. Not only that, but you will win the future business, the ongoing revenues in managing that system, and the inevitable expansions and enhancements for years to come. I can think of no better method to gaining strategic advantage and growing revenues than having these skills. There is a bonus. Siemens has spent over $1 billion developing an integrated platform of software and hardware. Firms realize around a 30% reduction in the execution time in their projects because much can be done simultaneously rather than serially. The tools are here. I am still surprised at how few organizations today are taking advantage of them. You can today design and run the supply chain and operations of tomorrow completely virtually and test its viability. So the mission is, first, start a task force now, if you haven't already, to digitalize your enterprise. This includes writing specifications for real-time data you expect internally and externally. Second, begin the design of the adaptable, flexible supply chain of the future using the tools available today. Again, these tools can get you not only a block diagram or an architectural view of a distribution center. I'm talking about running a system, including its code for all of its controllers as it handles various scenarios you throw at it to tip it over. The end goal for this virtual model or digital twin is that you can find what the edge of your capabilities will be. You will know what kind of seasonal changes you can handle. You can test whether stockouts will occur and under what circumstances, how various product mixes will affect delivery, and how changing customer demand will affect performance. Third, know that whoever you are within your organization, from top to bottom and left to right, you can be empowered to know that you will only survive through VUCA times by applying digitalization principles, and that with them you can thrive and grow. There's more opportunity now than ever before. I appreciate the time we've had, and if I can be of any assistance to you, reach out to me. Thanks for listening.
And that was an enormous amount of information about the technology. And again, regardless of where we are, what we're going through, in my opinion, and in other experts' opinions, we're going to be going through this disruptive technology. I'll never forget one time I was talking to David Roberts, who works for Singularity University, which is a large think tank out west. And he said he doesn't know whether to call it disruptive technology or destructive technology, not in a negative way, but in a positive way, in that it's destructing its way through our old paradigms and mind shifts. So thank you, Craig, for all of that information. That was really fascinating. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go into the Q&A portion of this presentation, and we're going to bring Craig on to actually ask him some questions live online. I'm excited about that. So while Craig's getting situated and coming on, you can submit your questions in the Q&A area of the webinar. We'll get to as many of those as we can. And for those that we can't get to, we will have a mechanism to follow up with you. Having said all that, let me welcome Craig in for our live Q&A. Hey, Craig, how you doing?
Great. Great to be here. Thanks for setting this up.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. It's good to see you. Are you showing us how bright you are with all the books behind you so that everybody knows you?
That was the idea. Yeah. All props.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. I'm serious. No, there's this good stuff.
Yeah, no,
Jim Tompkins' books. We were joking before this thing, and Jim saw it and he said, "Any of my books up there?" And I called his bluff.
Of course you had one. Yeah, no, that's great. Well, one of the things I told our producer, Frank Schwartz, from G3L is, that's what I love about you. You're one of these engineers who is really, really bright, obviously has a lot of knowledge, but you have a passion that I am so glad to see for this industry, and what you can do to help people in big ways. I mean, my goodness gracious, what we just saw there in that keynote, you know, I can tell you is just fantastic on how we really can address this. So we do have multiple questions. Yeah, no. Yeah.
I was like a dog being let out of a car. You know, all this data
Right.
I wanted to put into this one thing. So I apologize for the concentrated nature of it, but hopefully we can, make the best of it.
Yeah, no, I'm sure we can. And, with these webinars, it's kind of a good thing to do because people can watch them over and over. And so, they can certainly let that, get absorbed in more over time. So I appreciate that. Okay, so we've got just 15 or so minutes, and I want to get to as many questions as we can. And again, I appreciate you doing this live. I think it just adds so much to the webinar. The first question that we have here is, what are the medium and long-term effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on the supply chain?
Well, on the supply chain, I mean, obviously there are huge social things happening. which we're waiting to see play out. And I have my theories about that, but they're all conjecture. But from a supply chain point of view, I was just reading a statistic that Walmart, which Jim mentioned earlier, has seen a 74% increase on their e-commerce sales. It's incredible.
Right.
And I think what we're seeing is from a supply chain point of view, we were seeing a disruptive trend already, as you mentioned at the top.
Right.
But now with the COVID, it is this huge discontinuity. And now we are in an area unprecedented, but relying on the e-commerce and the digital marketplace. So digital is not just a place where, you know, that started out as being a neat place where you could buy a few things and people could chat and there was, you know, sort of ongoing interaction. The supply chain has to be digital. It has to be connected. And more than ever, it's not like things have turned 180. It's just we've put the accelerator on. And that's what I see as being the big difference is what we already saw as now what seems like a groundswell, even though it was very disruptive, has just gone to a place that we're not going back to normal. And like Jim said earlier, normal is now a concept that we need to almost just toss out. It's not helpful.
No.
Change.
Yeah, again, and I so love that about him, how he takes something that everybody else is just using and really not thinking about and says, yeah, you probably want to rethink the way you're thinking that.
Yeah.
One of the things you mentioned in your promotional piece for this webinar that I loved, and we certainly don't have to dive into it, but I love the quote you had where you said, the gentleman said, today is the slowest day of the rest of your life.
Yeah, that was a Justin Trudeau-ism. He said, change has never been this fast, but it will never be this slow again. That's how he put it. Which
well,
yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. We're in a zone where I was talking with a general manager. He's in the UK, but he said that one of his friends who owns a company and all his workers had gone, of course, and were working from home. And he was saying, they're never coming back. And I thought for a second he meant he was closing down. He said, no, it's so effective for them to work from home. Why am I paying for this building? Why am I heating and cooling it and insuring it and all this stuff? I'm shutting it down. We're going to work this way. It just has changed so many things.
Yeah, it's so interesting how we do that, you know, in my now going on 6th decade on the planet. And I've seen these seasons, if you will, of how we go from one to the other, where we're doing things now we wouldn't have dreamt of doing just 20 years ago and vice versa. And to the audience's edification, knowledge, and informational, you know, we do go back to things. So be very careful thinking we never go back to something. I remember when I was working for an apparel company in the mid 90s and everything was going overseas. And one of our very experienced, mature executives said, yeah, don't count on that lasting forever or that being the only thing we do. And so, you know, it's just fascinating. So going back to something isn't bad is my point there. Just, you know, it's worth investigating. It's okay if you tried something and going back to something is better. Just don't think it's you know, that it's something you have to do or that you will be guaranteed that it's better, because as we've been saying on this webinar, going back isn't necessarily better. Sometimes going to the next thing is necessarily better. Next question. So here's another one, you know, that's come in different forms and fashion. So how quickly are robots being deployed in distribution centers and displacing jobs?
Well, as it was in the program that the MHI organization does their annual report, and it's well done. Obviously, they do a fantastic job. And what I found interesting was that in 2019. They had this question, what's the disruptive nature of automation and robotics? And it was 39% in 2019 said, yep, very much so. It is robotics and automation. That has jumped to 67% just from 2019 to 2020.
Right.
And so let's look at this for a second. Robotics and automation, it's just a tool. And it is when we look at this idea of is it displacing workers, and it's sometimes looked at in a negative way, I challenge people to look at that as, first of all, distribution centers and Amazon and Walmart, et cetera, are having a really hard time finding labor in the first place. So we need someone, could we find some people? The talent gap is the #1 problem. So we need to have tools to make people more effective and efficient, but it's just a tool. And these science fiction novels that come out saying, oh, you know, they're going to take over the world. Yeah. Not any more than the air wrench at your mechanic's place is going to take over the world. He may have been using a manual wrench before, and now he's got an air wrench. It's a lot better, you know, it's just, and he's got the tire off. Right. That's what a robot is. And it's the same as our digital assistants and our handheld, you know, phones. We're using them. They're a tool. They don't take over anything. They just open up new opportunities for us to grow. So it is going to affect the labor force, obviously, but it's only in a way that is absolutely essential. And the use of robotics and technologies like robotics, automated gantry systems, depalletizers, gappers, sorters, all the things that are in material handling. I'm working with companies now where they're saying, yes, this concept has always existed. We need this, but we need it more efficient. It needs to give us data in real time right now. We need to have better throughput, and we need to rethink how this thing can be modular and flexible over time, because it may be different a year from now. We may need 4 lanes here and 3 lanes there, or whatever. And that's the kind of thinking that I'm trying to get at in this presentation, is that these tools, which is all they are really, just bring us flexibility.
So now that you've had 20 minutes to think about it since Dr. Tompkins' talk, one of the questions we have here is, he talked about optimization and optionality, which I thought was fascinating. But take us now from that into the legacy systems that are, you know, obviously being used, you know, versus the greenfield. So in your world of all of this technology, as it relates to optionality, give us maybe your thoughts on that and maybe a bit of an application for that.
So you're saying that, you know, how do we bring the new to the old and move forward? Obviously, you're not going to, it's easy to talk about. Talk is cheap, sure, and it's easy to talk about how transform everything. Yeah. Throw out what you have and get the new. Well, obviously we can't do that. Right. I remember seeing a statistic that Frito-Lay had continued to increase at double digits each year, their output and their production, and obviously their distribution channel, but had not put a single extra square foot of footprint anywhere. Right. So they were building up and in and around and making faster, et cetera. And so there certainly is plenty of opportunity for us to move into existing legacy systems and say, okay, what do we need to do here? It doesn't have to mean that we throw it out, but it does mean we have to transform it. And this idea of being able to do a point cloud, I don't think people realize that you can get a point cloud model of an existing system, brownfield plant, and it is down to the millimeter of everything that's in that facility, right. Bring it into software, and now it's, you know, you're at your leisure to change it, run it, play with it, update it, do options with it. And that is probably the most, to me, groundbreaking technology that we've got, because it does do what you said. Take what you have, right, and now bring it into the digital world and make it what it needs to be. And then you can decide on, okay, we'll close those two and bring them together in one, or we'll take this one and change the product mix and do that. I mean, it gives you all the options that you need.
Well, and one of the things you did was you relieved all the parents as we go through the shelter in place on letting their kids play video games. They all feel good about that now.
That's a controversial topic.
but I can tell you, I know a lot of people that very, very much appreciate that. Another question that we have. So I love how you answered the last question, and it sounds more strategic, which is good. We need to know that. And certainly, you know, you can dive a lot deeper into that with people. But let's talk tactical here for the next question. And that is, what technology is the most important right now to get through this crisis, what we're going through right now?
That's a toughie. Like we have to pick just one, right?
Right.
being a nerdy kind of engineering guy, that's a toughie.
Yeah.
Well, there's a thing I read recently about any disruptive technology, and it's going to go back to the steam engine and even the printing press or whatever, is that a technology comes into being and then there's a latency period. And usually it's a whole generation. It's like 20 years.
Sure.
It really is implemented and brings a benefit. And in the case of the steam engine, for example, it came along and they said, okay, now we can put the steam engine on the side of our factory and we can run that shaft throughout the whole place that was normally run by a water wheel or a horses or something.
Right.
And they didn't really fundamentally change anything. So there was no real benefit. But then when they started building new factories, and then the electric motor came along and these things started changing the way that we could do. We didn't try to have these high rise buildings that were manufactories. Now they were spread out and we could do things more efficiently. It started changing things. Well, the internet's the same way. The internet was around in the 90s, right? Pets.com came out. Everyone's going to buy their stuff from Pets.com.
Right.
They spent $26 million. I think their revenues never even got to $15 million and they shut it down because it was too early. People weren't there yet. Well, now we're here. So that's a long way to get to your answer, which is right now, the internet and the connectivity that we have, which is essential for this meeting. It's essential for the 6 meetings I had yesterday, and 7 meetings I had on Monday.
Right.
Don't discount the fact that we are now meeting, collaborating, doing business online. And it just goes to show that this technology is the same technology that's going to connect your business globally. And it's not just for meetings, but to be able to connect and have dashboards that say, this is what's happening in Singapore, this is what's happening in the UK, this is what's happening wherever. And bringing that data is essential. That connectivity is, I think, by far the most important technology of our time. And the idea that we're all less than a second away from each other via electronic wires through the internet, that's hard to really fathom the gravity of that.
Yeah, no, it's funny. As I'm sure I've been watching a lot of webinars and involved in a lot of meetings, and it's a double-edged sword because it's that same connectivity that allowed us to get all of the information that caused us to get into where we are right now in decision-making and direction and vision and all that. But it's also the same technology that's going to get us out of it, right, and make us better. And so it's kind of just interesting how that IoT thing and that connectivity thing, has it's 2 sides of the same coin, if you will, right? It really is.
Yeah, because I want to point that out, that there is more opportunity now than ever before. Businesses and services that you can provide, it's time to jump on this and find out how you can make money with it, how you can really change and fill needs in the marketplace that didn't exist 10 years ago or 5 years ago, or maybe even last year, because there are so many opportunities now, and businesses are booming that we wouldn't have really conceived of 5 years ago. Right. And a lot of it has to do with digitalization.
Yeah, no, that's right. Well, once again, thank you so much. Your presentation was phenomenal. Thank you for all of the effort. For all of our visual learners out there, they certainly got a great presentation, right? Which is most of us, right? I mean, studies have shown that, especially in the material handling logistics industry, most of us are visual learners. So thank you for putting that together and putting the visuals on that. And with that, I just wanted to say thank you also for being here and going through the questions and answers. And I wish you the best, and I'm sure we'll connect very soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, thank you so much. And so now what we're going to do this same thing we did with Dr. Tompkins. We're going to show a summation video or a video of Craig's talk, but more in a summary type basis. So what I would ask you to do is please welcome Craig in his summation video.
Today's supply chain model must embrace automation and digitalization. Moving to a digital model must happen immediately, and there are tools for design, testing, deployment, and management of this new model. The hardware and software tools are available today, and when used effectively, will facilitate a rapid reinvention of our business as usual in the supply chain. Incremental change will not serve us, nor will modifications in isolated areas. An end-to-end approach is required. The good news is that these disruptive technologies when embraced, can give competitive advantage and help your organization to grow and thrive in these volatile, uncertain times.
So once again, thank you, Craig, so much for all of that information. And I hope you got a lot of value out of that. You know, what Craig did was he showed us how technology is helping us in a volatile, uncertain world, regardless of which season we're in or what ingredient of the volatility, as well as the complexity. And I know there are several of you out there that are now thinking and your minds are churning about how you can maybe get some of that information. And again, we will allow and help all of you to reach our presenters so that you can follow up with them. Please know that. What we're going to do now is something that's a little different as far as webinars are concerned. The sponsor, Frank Schwartz from G3L Leadership, who I again thank very much for being here, is in a few minutes going to give us just a few minutes on leadership development and an inspiration, because one of the things we're trying to accomplish here is that in addition to the material, the content that we're giving you on VUCA and how it applies to us, we're also trying to give you the ability to create leaders to help us get through and roll out of the current crises, but then also to be better prepared going forward. Because as Dr. Tompkins mentioned in his presentation, you know, it doesn't take but 5 to 10 years for us to go through something like this. And so it would behoove us to be thinking about how we can prepare these leaders. And Frank's going to come up and talk about that in a few minutes. But before we do that, I wanted to introduce you to our next presenter by way of some questions. I want to ask our presenter some questions, and then what we'll do is we'll go into Frank's talk on leadership, and then we will hear from our presenter with his presentation. So with that, please join me in an interview that I had with our next presenter, Krish Nathan. Well, hello, Krish Nathan. It's so good to have you at this webinar, and I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us about what the audience is going to hear in your keynote. And before we go to break, I just wanted to go over with you a highlight of that. And that highlight for me is the culture that you have at SDI that you talk about as we go into this volatile, uncertain time that we're in right now, specifically as it relates to the business crisis. And I just wanted you to maybe share for 30 or 45 seconds with the audience a little bit of that culture that you have at SDI so they have an idea of what to expect when they hear your keynote in a few minutes.
Okay. Hi, Ralph. Well, listen, thanks for letting us participate in this. I think it's super important to try and bond a group of people together and you know, give you a few ideas about what we're doing. I don't think we know what we're going through. It's you know, we're all learning as we go. So none of us have been through this before.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. The genuineness, I think, is what everybody's going to get from you. You know, you and I have worked together in the past, and I've been honored to work with your group for a couple of years, a few years ago. And I know personally how well your culture is in your company. And I'm not trying to oversell that. I just want everybody to know that, you know, what they need to know, in addition to what we've already heard, is how the people matter and how the culture of those people matter for a manufacturer and integrator like yourself when you're going through something like this. And so again, if you could just share with them a little bit of what that means to you and your company.
Yeah. Well, listen, it reminds me, we coined a new phrase around here recently that's really stuck with me, which if I can remember correctly was always tell the truth. It's a lot easier to remember. I think for us, it's been, you know, for us, just trying to be brutally honest with the team, with all of the people that we have in the organization, and just share with them openly where we're at and the challenges we're all dealing with. And so I think we generally have a very open culture, a very supportive culture, and we're trying to foster that in, and make sure we don't lose it. Lose it during this time where everybody, most of our people are isolated and working from home, and some of us are used to it, but many of them are not. And many of our people, it's team working environment that they're used to. And so, it's a very difficult time. And then there are also, I think all of our people, like all of us, I think we're all fearful for what's, what does the future hold, and do we have a career ahead of us? Sure. I've been in this business here at SDI 20 years, and this is certainly the most challenging time that we've experienced. I thought 2008 was going to be the most challenging of my career, but you never get to cease to be surprised.
Yeah. Yes. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So for us, it's all been about openness, encouraging people to share where they're at in terms of what they're doing. We've done a lot of virtual social things, right? Evenings, during the day. We've tried to keep that keep the closeness and the intimateness of the organization alive, which has been difficult, but we're continuing to push that, and we think that is materializing in a maintained working environment. It's difficult to tell when you're remote from everybody, but it feels like we're still keeping the group together.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate what you're doing there. And I know this audience is going to benefit from hearing your keynote immensely, because it really does come down to the people. We talk about that all the time, and now we get to actually see it in action as far as the people being the most important part. So again, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And we're looking forward to your keynote.
Thank you.
All right, so I hope that's working. Hey, look there, yeah, okay, good, we're good. I really appreciate Chris's words there, and what he had to say. It's funny, he's talking about that this is the most challenging time that he's been through, and 2008 was the last time that it was really, really bad, and it's funny because my previous company, I started in 2008. And when I decided now, I think I'm going to, branch out in this other world and do these other things. Again, here we are in this crazy VUCA time, right? So I guess if I ever come to you and say, hey, I got this great idea for a business, you probably want to go ahead and short the market and, and cash in. I don't know. But in all seriousness, my name is Frank Schwartz. I'm incredibly glad to be here. I'm really, really honored that I got to work with Ralph on this. If I'm going to be very, very candid and open about it, I'm not sure. I hope I can add some value to what's been said, because you've heard some pretty good presenters, and I know what's coming, and so I'm pretty excited about that as well. I'm personally grateful that you guys have all come today to learn a little bit about what some of the leaders in supply chain material handling are doing, as far as guiding their teams and trying to lead through this time where VUCA is reigning supreme. At G3L, we believe that effective organizations begin with effective people. And what that means is that we have to be making of ourselves the kind of people and thus leaders that engender the trust in our teams and clients that make us worthy to be followed. And what that means is we have to lead with virtue. We can't just do things as Dr. Tompkins mentioned, and as Ralph has talked about, and everyone else as well, is normal isn't going to cut it. Back to normal isn't going to cut it. We're going to have to get back to better. And so a virtuous leader, as we define it, is one that has both the leadership skills as well as the leadership character, the habits of moral and ethical excellence that are necessary to not just be an effective manager, but to be a leader. There's a huge difference between managing people and leading people. And for those of us on this call, certainly you've got some interest in that. And for those of us those of you all in the material handling industry, it's going to be more important than ever that we don't just have managers in organizations, but we have organizations of leaders and not just with leaders. And we want to be the kind of leaders that are going to leave a legacy of virtue after we've moved on, right? And so things have changed, we know, and they're continuing to change at a rate that's unprecedented, and we're going to have to learn to lead in this new way. And so in these kinds of high volatility and uncertain and complex and ambiguous situations, I see that there's kind of a couple things. There are problems and there are conditions. Now, conditions are things that are external to us, over which we have no direct control, right? Those are things like the weather or, I don't know, a global pandemic, right? And a condition is something that causes challenges, but that I personally cannot change, okay? A problem, on the other hand, is an obstacle that can and must be dealt with. Now, again, it would be silly of me to reiterate the fact that we're in a situation that no one could have predicted just 6 months ago. And candidly, while I think that many of us are feeling a little more confident than we were, we really don't know what the next 6 months holds for us. And that's why what Ralph mentioned earlier is that preparedness is how we're going to get out of this, right? Preparedness beats control. We can't control what the government's going to do in a crisis. We can't control, like Dr. Tompkins said, we can't control whether a tsunami or a hurricane or some other natural disaster on the other side of the world is going to affect our business. We can't control a lot of things, but we can prepare for them. And we define preparedness as getting ready for the expected things while always staying ready for the unexpected things. Now, I can't obviously cover all that I would like to in a few minutes that we have together while I'm talking. We teach this kind of stuff in full day seminars, and I can't train you to do that in this setting, because that's something that takes 12 months or more oftentimes to bring it to an entire organization or to an entire executive team in the real world. So I wanted to give you just what I think is kind of a simplified overview that I hope will be kind of the most help with regard to leadership through this situation and into the next one. Because I don't know how to break it to you. This isn't the first time this has happened. And just like has been said many, many times on this webinar today, it's going to happen again, and it's going to keep happening faster. These events are going to start closing in on each other until we're in a situation where it's just going to be a lot of chaos a lot of the time, right? And so our best bet is to prepare. So this is the part where Ralph encouraged me to put on a white coat and a stethoscope, but I wimped out. I did. But it's why you've seen all this stuff, right? It has kind of a medical-ish branding to it. Because the fact is, you've been infected with the VUCA virus, right? And so your lives have become volatile, uncertain, complex, or complicated, and ambiguous, right? So I am going to be the doc, the DOC, to give you the antidote, okay? So you've got the VUCA virus, and I'm going to give you the DOC to get out of it. The first thing you need is the D, and that is discipline. This is, in part, what I was referring to before about becoming the right kind of person. Leading now and into the future has to start with you. You have to change as a result of this, and you have to come back better. You can't go back to doing things the way that you were doing them. It's just not going to cut it. And so we have to develop daily disciplines in our lives that will help us to build an immunity against VUCA. We've got to become disciplined in the practice of self-improvement in such a way that we can maintain our cool during periods of low visibility and high stress and chaos like we're in right now. And so there are certain things that we must do on a daily basis to build guardrails for ourselves so that as we're driving down the road, we feel free to accelerate because we know we're not going to fly over the edge of the cliff, right? So the second is the O, right? And that's obedience. Now, that may sound a little strange, but what it means is an obedience to purpose. So first you have to get yourself disciplined, and then you got to figure out what is your purpose, not just the company's purpose, right? The vision statement or whatever that sits on the break room wall, right? But also your personal purpose. Plans and executions and all the things that we've heard about so far and that we will hear about more of and will continue to hear about in days to come, those things can pivot. But purpose is something that should not pivot quickly. If it changes, it needs to happen over time. And it needs to be gradual and careful. Our purpose is something that drives what we do. And it really explains to the people that we serve in our companies as well as serve outside of our companies, our clients. It serves to tell them why we exist, why we do what we do. If we lose sight of that when things get a little dark or a little muddy, we're going to end up losing our way. And we can't be obedient to that personal or organizational purpose if we don't have one, or if it's not super clear what it is. And so one of the ways that we do that, let me help, it starts with the D, right, is through developing those disciplines. So we've got to develop discipline. We've got to exert obedience to our purpose. And the last is the C, and that's consistency. None of the skills or character or anything else that you develop will matter if you're not practicing every single day. And it's simply not something that you can do by yourself. You have to have someone to help you remain accountable and to keep your guardrails in place so that you stay on course. A lot of times we use this phraseology of, I'm gonna hold myself accountable to a thing. And in a way that kind of doesn't make any sense. If I could hold myself accountable to it, I would just do the thing, whatever that may be, right? Healthy eating, exercising, whatever those things might be, right? You're gonna have to have some assistance in order to remain consistent. That's just the way it works. And in these times, in times of crisis, we're going to find that we only perform to our lowest level of training. Whatever we train for, the lowest level of that is going to be what comes out in a time of crisis. Let me give you an example. So if you've never run further than a 5K, don't expect to do really well if you're called on to run a marathon. It just isn't going to work if you have not trained and been consistent over a long period of time, being disciplined in your habits and obedient to your purpose so that you can remain consistent. Now, that has to do with your personal life, but it also has to do with the systems and the processes that you develop in your business. So discipline, obedience, and consistency. It's just kind of a high level way of looking at how to not just get back to normal, but get back to better. Now, there's going to be some contact information for me at the end of the webinar, and I certainly hope to talk to some of you about this kind of thing further. But for now, that's what I want you to take home, is that the discipline, obedience, and consistency is the way that you're going to get through this. And that's the way that we develop leaders to navigate these things going forward. So enjoy the rest of the program, and thanks very much for being here.
Thank you, Frank. I appreciate that. And it sounds like I'm going to refer to you as Doc Schwartz going forward, so that I remember the DOC, discipline, obedience, and consistency. So once again, man, I can't thank you enough for helping us put on this webinar. You know, when you and I talked about VUCA and the supply chain and leadership development, you were just so eager to help and so eager to be really a philanthropist for us. And, you know, I just can't say enough about that. And
I appreciate you doing that. And I'm sorry for jumping in, but I did want to say one thing, and that is that the reason that I thought this was so important too, Ralph, is when I asked you, when we were very first talking about this months ago, when we started planning to do this, I said, why do you care so much about this industry? Like, why, what is the big deal? Like, you know, stuff moves around or whatever. And when Ralph explained it with the passion and the insight that he has over the dozens of years that he's been doing this, it really came home to me that this is the backbone of America, brother, right? I mean, this is where everything happens, is in this industry.
Right.
All that stuff that everyone loves ordering right now when they're locked at home. And
no, that's right.
This is it.
Yeah, the supply chain is like the producer, right? The only time we ever get noticed is when something doesn't go right.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, I'll bounce off again, but again, thank you guys very, very much. And thank you, Ralph. Appreciate it.
Yeah, our pleasure. And again, thank you so much. Man, oh man, this has just been wonderful. And now what we're going to do is we're going to transition back into the program, and we're going to hear from one Mr. Krish Nathan, who you heard me interview just a few minutes ago. And like I said in the interview, I have worked with Krish in the past. I've actually helped produce his executive forum out in Las Vegas a few years ago, the SDI's Executive Leadership Forum. Sadly, they have had to postpone that for this coming year because of what we're going through. But I certainly hope and give them all the encouragement to pick that back up in 2022, because it's just so really well done and very powerful. And I would encourage you to be on the lookout for that. And now to bring up Krish, I want to introduce you to Krish Nathan. He's the CEO of SDI. He's been with that organization for 20 years now. And he's just got a great range of experience that's allowed him to work with the clients directly. He's an engineer by education and trade, and he's gotten all of his formal education in Great Britain. He is, if you didn't already notice, a Brit, and he is a really fantastic person. The culture that he has at SDI is something that I admire and have admired for years, and that's why I thought it was so important to bring him on to talk about the people, because as I said in my opening, we all talk about this in conference rooms and boardrooms, how the people are our most important asset, and what you're getting ready to hear is how somebody took that out of the boardroom and put it into his company. Please welcome Krish Nathan.
Good afternoon. My name is Krish Nathan. I am CEO of SDI, based out of Los Angeles. We're a global systems integrator, and we deliver materials handling systems throughout the world, primarily focused on the North America and South America region. We deliver systems that encompass unit sortation, tilt tray, bomb bay, pouch technology, fully automated conveyor systems, high-speed carton sortation, print and apply, and we deliver a total software package to support and accommodate those technologies. We began this year 2020 with our record backlog of work, and we consider ourselves very fortunate that when we were hit with this crisis, we were in such healthy shape. So we came into the year with a record backlog. We went into February and hosted our annual user conference in the Las Vegas area, which we've been doing now for over 15 years. And then we came back from that, and the news began to break regarding the COVID situation. So we watched the news very carefully. We stayed very close with some of our European partners, European colleagues, and as such we were, I feel, very quick to get ahead of this challenging situation. We notified all our offices around the US and the LATAM region to begin planning for a challenging time ahead and begin planning for the social distancing that we felt was going to be necessary. We took measures in our Los Angeles office 2 weeks ahead of the mandatory state stay at home, and immediately moved all of our office-based employees to home working stations, facilitated them with laptops, mobile communications, and very quickly, within a week or 10-day period, we'd moved our offices, our head office, to remote working. Our offices in New Jersey and Florida, we moved those at about the same time. Our entire support desk that supports our customers we activated our emergency plan for that group, which we've had in place for other emergencies like hurricanes, since it's based in Florida, and that basically took those people immediately working from home. They were all set up anyway. So from a business continuity perspective, we were able to pretty much continue business as usual. From a manufacturing perspective, we immediately, again 2 weeks before the mandatory stay-at-home order, we began temperature checks. We opened up a screening point in the factory, such that everybody that came into the facility, internal people and external people, were checked for temperature and any symptoms, and if anybody failed the temperature gauge, tested over a certain temperature, we asked them to go home. Or if it was a vendor, then obviously we wouldn't allow them onto the facility. So as such, we've had we've been very successful at combating the COVID challenge. The manufacturing shop remains open. We've split the teams over multiple shifts so that we can observe the appropriate social distancing in our manufacturing area, and we've managed to continue manufacturing. In our field activities, really operated the same way. Immediately made sure that we were practicing safe working conditions, tried to source as many masks as possible to get out to field employees, stopped people flying, made decisions to drive people to locations instead of flying. And as such, have managed to complete some of the projects that we had ongoing throughout this process, and continue to operate on facilities that we're building today. From a business continuity perspective, we have been challenged with some business postponements. We've had two major projects postponed with retailers that unfortunately have had to close their entire network of stores, which is thousands of stores, and affected hundreds of thousands of people. So that's challenging for our business. As a result of that, we quickly took measures to manage cash flow. We made payroll reductions, reductions in rental expense. Across the board, we looked across the business to find where we could conserve cash, and also furloughed a small number of people. About 15% of our employees were furloughed, and some of them full-time furloughs, some of them percentage furloughs. And we did our payroll cuts on a sliding scale, starting with the highest at board level, highest percentage, to the lowest percentage at the office level. In the field and our manufacturing shop, we did not cut salaries. We did not want to impact those people that are going above and beyond and coming into the office and working, continue to operate. So we made no pay cuts at that level. Our customers have been tremendous. Some of them have converted their manufacturing facilities over to mask and gown production, since a lot of our customers are apparel orientated. And a number of them are seeing an explosion of e-commerce orders. So many of our customers are multi-channel customers, so they have retail stores and e-commerce platforms. Obviously their retail stores were shut down and are still shut down. Those generate a tremendous amount of their revenues, but their clients still want to buy their product, and so a lot of the business has converted over to e-com orders. And so they've seen a massive spike in e-commerce activity, and for some of those customers we've scrambled to deliver immediate solutions, some immediate put-wall solutions and some software solutions that have allowed those customers to continue fulfilling their customer requirements and staying in business, while maintaining the keeping them a low-cost investment, so making them a software delivery rather than a full hardware rollout of a solution. So we've kept those investments for them at a minimum, but created an environment where they can manage more orders through their fulfillment processes. For the future, We don't know the future. None of us can predict what's going to happen. We believe that the demand on e-commerce solutions is going to grow. We believe that that's going to mean that when we're able to open up fully, and when our customers are moved back towards a full operational environment, the demand on their e-commerce activity is going to increase dramatically, and so we're going to need to be positioned and ready to react to that, to support those people. So that's why we work very hard to keep our employee base in place. So we have a highly tenured team and a highly experienced team. Whilst it's challenging from a cash flow perspective, we worked very, very hard to make cuts that will enable us to keep everybody employed where possible, such that when the business does swing back, and when the pendulum swings back, and when we become very busy again, which we fully expect, we have the skill set and the people available to immediately jump onto that demand. So we feel challenged by the current environment. We feel positive about the potential for the future, and we feel as a business we've taken very aggressive steps to make sure that we are here. We are strong after this is over, but we've maintained our full capabilities and all the intellect that's been built in this business over the last 30 years. So that's where we're at. I appreciate you listening. Thank you very much. Good night.
Well, thank you, Krish. I appreciate that. And like I said earlier, you can see from that presentation how sincere he is and how vulnerable in telling us kind of what they're going through and how they've managed as it relates to their current operation. And the culture is just really, really good there. So you can see how that really piggybacks on what Craig Henry at Siemens was talking about, where in the material handling industry for the last handful of years, we've been talking about labor and technology, and that's essentially what we have going on here is somebody who's now applied their culture to what's going on in labor. Well, once again, we're going to go into the Q&A portion of our meeting, and what that means is you can certainly send us your questions for Krish, and I would encourage you to do that while we bring Krish up on the screen and have him here live. We want to welcome in Krish Nathan, who is, by the way, attending this meeting very early because he is on Pacific time. So not only do we thank you for being a part of the webinar, but we also thank you for being live because of where you are. Welcome, Krish.
Hi, Ralph. Thank you. You hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
And thank
I do try and get up before 8:30 in the morning usually.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. It is 8:30 now. So no, we appreciate that, and we appreciate you you know, what you're doing. You know, again, as a manufacturing facility, my goodness gracious, you talk about, you know, processes and people and how they're interconnected. It doesn't get more interconnected than that. You know, it's hard to manufacture sort track your unit sortation system that you have, you know, from your house. So obviously you have some things that you have to do as a manufacturer, and how you're dealing with that right now is, you know, it's just admirable. So we do have a couple of questions for you, and that is great. The first question is, so as things slowly begin to open back up, how do you anticipate manufacturing facilities, warehouses, DCs, you know, what problems do you think as a manufacturer are people going to have getting people back to work and re-engaged?
Well, I mean, like, look, so I think many of you people have touched on it. There's a new, you know, this is a new norm, as everybody keeps saying. The challenges I mean, you know, the basic stuff in terms of how do you keep the place clean? How do you keep people apart? How do you give them people enough PPE? I think is the term that they're using. Basically, masks, right? How do you give people enough masks and gloves to be safe? And then how do you respond when you have an incident? So we're running installation sites all over the country. You know, in the worst hit places, New Jersey, and many other parts. So we've been working on job sites on, you know, this isn't new anymore. We've had several job sites where we've had COVID incidents where somebody in the building that we're working in has tested positive. So how do you respond to that?
Wow.
And how do you, and so, you know, you have to go through a whole cycle of testing and retesting and completely re-cleaning and so forth. So I think this, you know, I think this isn't going, it's not going to, there's no light switch where this goes away. You know, that this just becomes a way that you have to continue operating, and it's going to be both disruptive and create some inefficiency as well. I think for us, from a manufacturing point of view, from an installation point of view, from a delivery point of view, it's just impacting our efficiency because of all the additional challenges that we've got to deal with.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And you even said in your presentation how at the beginning of the year, you know, the business was really humming and you know, certainly pounding on every cylinder available. And, you know, and now you're going through what you're going through here. So another question that came in is, you know, how do you manage the fact that some of your clients, you know, still have a very large demand? And you know, it's interesting how the different sectors, if you will, are up and down, but some of them have a really high demand and need what you do, your products and services. So, you know, from a communication relationship with those clients, how are you managing that?
Well, just to sort of take the first part of your question, so our businesses continue to be, somebody asked me this yesterday, actually, in an interview, our businesses continued to be strong with revenues. From my perspective, as far as I can see, what this has done, it's exacerbated the difference between the haves and the have-nots, right? So it's just exacerbated that gap dramatically, where you've got a certain portion of our customer base that's eliminating people, has got all of their stuff. You've got, you know, total brick and mortar retail. They're completely shut down, or they were until, you know, let's say the beginning of this week or middle of last week. So completely shut down. So they're in, you know, crisis mode. How do they manage cash? That, you know, they're not trying to make any investments. They just can't. They're just managing their cash. Versus somebody that's got maybe a 20 or 30% of their revenue might be coming from e-com. That was before this crisis. Now that's been jumped up by anywhere between twofold to, you know, I've got a customer that's got sixfold e-commerce.
I bet.
And they're a big national player,
right.
That's gone from, you know, has had a sixfold increase in their e-commerce. They are, you know, they're still pushing us to or asking us to deliver systems to them for this peak. Right. So it's making us, it's very busy, but we're very busy with a much smaller percentage of customers, because we've got a big portion of our customers do we even come out of this alive? And look, you know, we all know the news. There's some of them that are already, you know, I had 2 customers file Chapter 11 last week.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You bring up a good point, and another segue to a question that we have. You know, we've been talking about e-com now for, you know, since 2000, since you came on to SDI. And, you know, what's really interesting is I know, you know, just a year ago or so, I don't know that it ever really eclipsed 2 digits. I could be wrong on that, but I think we're still hovering in that just breaking 2 digits or just broke 2 digits. But now, because of what's going on, you know, it took us forever to go from 0 to 2 to 4 to 6 to 8. You know, and some people were predicting in 5 years we'd be at 12% or 16%. Where do you stand from where you sit on what that is currently, and where do you see it going forward based on all of this?
Yeah, I mean, to your point again, so, you know, a good, if it's a traditional brick and mortar type of player that's done very well in ecom,
Right.
might have been pre this in the 15 to 20% range,
Right.
in my experience.
Yeah.
And you know, within a week or two of this thing hitting, we were saying internally that this is the final nail in the coffin, and we've gone from we've just accelerated the growth of ecom.
That's right.
I don't know, several years. You know, I was saying it's gone 3 years in 3 weeks. That was, you know, when we were 3 weeks into this thing. I don't know where it's just spiked it so dramatically, and there's no question we're not nobody's reverting back from that.
Right.
It's just where is the balance? I still don't know. You know, none of us know where is the balance between a traditional, you know, let's call it an omni-channel player, a traditional brand, in terms of what they get from brick and mortar store and what they get from direct sales themselves and what they get from their e-com channel. But it's, you know, I think we were always saying maybe it's 15, it's 20, it's 30, but I think everybody can probably realistically see it's easily going to get to 50.
You're talking about something. Let me bring neuroplasticity into the conversation. Okay, so
big word.
So when you learn, what a lot of people submit is that you actually want to push and learn more and develop your ability to learn to a greater extent than needed, and even learn more information and get more experience. The military is very, very prudent at doing this, as well as some of the other bigger organizations. And the reason they do that is because if they'll do that, they know that after that training, then your mind will come back to another level, but it won't go back to where it was. It will be bigger and be able to receive more information. And so this is the neuroplasticity of learning. Well, what you're talking about, in my opinion, is that same theory, if you will, on e-com, where it is going to go up as a result of people being home and not being able to be out. It may, when this gets rolled out and things do start to maybe continue to this next normal, come down a little bit, but it's not going to go back to where we were. And I think what your point is, and it's a valid point, it's going to be easier for us to then see it go even higher, even quicker. And so I just would love for you to comment on that and how you think about that.
Yeah, I think, you know, look, you're going to see much. I do agree. I think it's going to settle back down. I mean, today,
sure.
I live in Los Angeles, and we're still on a stay-at-home order effectively. Sure. So everybody is there's no retail open. I mean, they've now just allowed us to open allowed retail stores to open.
Right.
And you have to go and pick up at the door. I mean, it's just might as well not bothered, frankly. But I mean, who's going? You know, you're going to
ship it to me.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's sort of my view of it. But so I think agree. It's gone up dramatically. Yes, it's going to come back down, but it will never come back down to where it was.
Correct.
There's no
question. And it'll be easier to go back up again because of what we've been through.
Sure.
Yeah,
sure.
The peaks, what we'll see.
The peaks that we're going to see, that we see in, we will. I'm sure. I have no doubt, and I'm sure. And it's not like I'm teaching anybody anything. I have no doubt that the peaks this year will be so much higher than they were last year. They won't be incrementally. It won't be a 5, 10, 15% anticipated growth. Maybe 30% if you were a very strong e-com guy. You were anticipating an e-com peak this year on Cyber Monday that may have been 20-30% over last year. It's going to be 4 or 5 times. It'll be 4 or 5 times fold that.
Right.
So those peaks are going to be so much spikier, and that's for us while we've continued to invest in unit level sortation and fulfillment, because that's what e-commerce is. It's item level. It's getting one item to me, and as we all know, a different item to you, and carrying hundreds of thousands of units of inventory in your portfolio, so that you make more available to your customers, more availability, better customer base, bigger customer base.
Yep. No, very good. Well, listen, we're out of time, but thank you so much for being here. This has been great. And for those of you who have seen Chris, you now see what it was I was talking about as far as his vulnerability, but also sincerity for his people. The other thing I would encourage you to do is reach out and check out Chris and SDI Systems, because in addition to all that, they also have a innovativeness and a creativity on how they do what they do, which I think is really cool. So I know you will look forward to seeing that. So Chris, once again, thank you for being here. Thank you for your effort, and I wish you the best. Be well and think good thoughts.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for inviting us.
My pleasure. Now what we're going to do is show a video of Chris's summation. Again, I just wanted all the presenters to present something that summarizes what they talked about so that you as the audience would walk away with a good summary. But remember, don't forget, Dr. Tompkins is still doing our close here, and it's really powerful, very inspirational, and you're going to get a lot of value out of it. And B, encourage your colleagues to view this on the rebroadcast, because as you've seen, there's a lot of information here on VUCA, volatility, how it relates to the industry, technology, and people. And with that, we will look at Chris Nathan's summary video.
All right, so I am Chris Nathan, CEO of SDI. Some of the things that we've been trying to do to keep the company culture alive and vibrant. Which is one of the things that we pride ourselves on. I believe that we're a great place to work. I think we have a great company culture, and this COVID crisis has certainly challenged that environment since we got into the working from home and basically positioned everybody in the home office very, very early on. So for us, this has been a 4 or 5 week period of time now where majority of our work people, our employees, have been working from home. Earlier today, we held our first global Teams meeting. We invited everybody to attend and send us in a picture of their workstation and bring their favorite beverage to the meeting. And we spent an hour just sharing a few of our experiences from all different parts of the LATAM region. So we had people giving us a few words from Chile and Colombia, the East Coast and the West Coast, from Cape Cod down to Florida. And it was great. It gave everybody a bit of a social release and just reminded them all that we're all in this together. We had some people sharing pictures of their dogs. A picture one of the people had it was his son's birthday, so we sang happy birthday to his 2-year-old son. And we had 110 people on that call with video conference, and everybody dialed in from home. It was a tremendous thing. Everybody really enjoyed it. Really felt it brought us as together as a group, and it just brought out the side of the company that this is why people work here. They work here because they enjoy it. Yeah, everybody enjoyed that, and hopefully they'll go into the weekend thinking that this is not all doom and gloom, and we'll all get through this together. And that's all from me. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the event. And that's all from me, and I'll continue working myself from home. See ya.
That's great. I love the end of that video. because again, it just shows the culture of that organization and Krish. So, you know, again, thank you to Krish. I really appreciate that. I'm so excited about this next section. Not that I haven't been super excited about all of the previous sections, but now Dr. Tompkins is going to come back on, and he's going to give us some final thoughts. And these final thoughts are the go forward, and it's brief but very impactful, and I know you'll feel the same way. So without further ado, I just want you to hear from Dr. Tompkins and what he has to say in his final thoughts.
As a follow-up to my VUCA presentation, I want to talk about something new, VUCA 2.0. Now, I didn't invent VUCA 2.0. It was invented by Bill George, a senior fellow at the Harvard Business School. And what he did is he came up with VUCA 2.0 as a remedy for VUCA. Here, he uses VUCA again, but VUCA 2.0, the V stands for vision, where what you need to have to solve VUCA is VUCA 2.0. You need to have vision, which is having the right strategy, the brand, the culture, the organizational structure, the right people, and the alignment of the staff, the suppliers, and the customers to come together to have a shared vision of how we're going to address VUCA. The U in VUCA 2.0 stands for understanding. So instead of uncertainty, we have understanding. And there's two things we need to understand. We need to understand the business requirements, and we need to understand the financial requirements. Business requirements is, what is our unique selling position? What is our value proposition? How are we going to market? How are we going to do sales? What's business development look like? From a financial point of view, it has to do with budget, profits, and the drivers of financial success. And so U stands for understanding. The C in VUCA 2.0 stands for courage. Instead of complexity, we have courage. We have to be courageous in our innovation, in our creativity, in our boldness. We need to assure accountability within the organization. It takes courage to do that. We have to dismantle complacency, and we have to establish a sense of urgency. And then lastly, in VUCA 2.0, the A doesn't stand for ambiguity, it stands for adaptability. The ability to do continuous improvement, to do transformation, to do reinvention. The ability to be anti-brittle, to provide optionality in our solutions, to be agile, to be flexible, and to be able to refine the process as we go. So VUCA 2.0 is an antidote to VUCA. I suggest you think about vision, understanding, courage, and adaptability.
Well, thank you, Jim. That was fantastic. VUCA 2.0. Don't forget, you heard about it here first. I hope you enjoyed everything we've done for you today. Thank you so much to the presenters, Dr. Tompkins, Craig Henry, and Krish Nathan. Thank you so much, every one of you. I know the audience enjoyed that. You provided so much value, and this is something we will talk about now and going forward. This topic of VUCA is not going away. It is something that's going to be in our industry for the foreseeable future, if not forever, and therefore we do need to be better prepared coming out of it and better prepared going into the next one. And for that, I want to thank our sponsor, G3L Leadership, and specifically Frank Schwartz, for all that you have done to make today possible, to make what we have done here available to this market at no cost, by the way, and I haven't mentioned that until now. It's no cost to you because of the generous sponsorship of G3L Leadership. And for that, I want to say thank you to them. Thank you once again. I wish you all very well, be well, and think good thoughts.